Hello everyone, welcome into Fatty's Feast, where we make the best food you'll ever eat without leaving your backyard. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be breaking all of the rules of barbecue by cooking a brisket hot and fast and seeing if we can get similar results to cooking a brisket low and slow. Let's get started. Now, if you've been doing barbecue for any amount of time, you know all too well that when you try to explain to someone who doesn't do barbecue that it takes 16 hours to cook a brisket, plus rest time, plus a bunch of other factors, they look at you like you have 6 heads. Like, who would want to sit outside and tend to a fire and watch a piece of meat cook for 16 hours just for a few minutes of pleasure at the end? But what we all know in barbecue is those results you get at the end of a 16-hour cook, they just can't be beat. But it is crazy. We're all crazy. If you're watching this channel, you're just as crazy as me, and it does take a special person to want to do that. However, I've even seen comments from you guys that say, hey Josh, I love doing barbecue. I love smoking like chicken or ribs or sausages. I just don't have the time to cook a brisket. And I've been there. I've wanted a brisket really, really bad, but I just didn't have 16 hours to sit outside with it. So today we're going to be testing the hot and fast brisket cooking method to see if we can get something similar to a low and slow brisket. Now, when I say hot and fast, I don't mean cooking at 500 degrees. Typically, your hot and fast briskets are cooked at temperatures between 300 and 350, whereas your low and slow are cooked between 225, 275. Cooking a brisket hot and fast will allow us to cook our brisket in way less time. Typically, you're looking at about 6 hours. But is the product going to be good in the end as if you take the time to cook a brisket? Personally, I don't think so, but we're gonna see. Now, I have my accepted way I've been cooking briskets for the last few years. If you want more information on my step-by-step method, check out this video right above me. That's part 1 of my How to Cook a Brisket series. I go into the trimming there, and then you go all the way to the cooking and the resting time. Today, we're basically taking all the theories I talked about in those videos and just throwing them out the window, because we're gonna be changing up quite a few things. But what we have in front of me today is a 10.5-ish pound brisket from Costco. It's a choice grade brisket. I would try to get a prime if I were doing this experiment. That's what I wanted to get, but Costco, of course, didn't have prime briskets. The reason for that is I want the fat content because we risk drying this brisket out, but a choice brisket will do. And plus it was cheap, so if we ruin it, I'm not really that upset. And as we go through this experiment today, I'm gonna be talking you through the things I'm looking at, as well as the things I would normally do during a brisket cook that I'm not doing today, or things I've changed. So without further ado, let's get this bad boy trimmed up, rubbed up, and smoked up. Okay, so right off the bat, if you've been watching me for any amount of time, you've already seen I did a few different things there. The first most obvious one was I put the brisket fat side down. Now, fat side down is usually used on kettle smokers or drum smokers. I use fat side up on my offset smokers, but the reason I'm changing it up today and putting it fat side down on this offset is A, the cooker's a little smaller, but B, because I want to protect the underside of the brisket from burning. In the past, with this smoker, I've burned the brisket on the bottom if I'm cooking at higher temperatures. Back sort of before I knew what I was doing, and I had that stupid baffle plate in here that all the old country pits come with. So I'm just gonna go fat side down for now, just as some added protection. What you also saw is I have my beef towel in there to render that down, and I do have a water pan as always. You also notice I put the brisket a little offset. So I put it at a different angle. Usually I have the point down here and the flat here, just straight across. I did that because A, we're on a smaller pit. I have my tallow, I have my water pan. I don't want those to burn or anything like that, but we're cooking at higher temperatures. I think if I just leave it like that, we'll have better temperatures all across the board rather than having the point in sort of a hotter spot where it's really, really hot. And the last different thing I did is I didn't let the smoker get up to the temperature we're going to be cooking at before I put the brisket on. I had it at about 250, and that's where I normally have it when we're going low and slow. But I didn't want to throw the brisket on at 300, 350 degrees because I don't want to like sear the brisket. I know that's a little, the temperatures are a little less than what you'd actually sear something with, but I don't want to throw a colder piece of meat on a really hot smoker. The brisket itself has been sitting out for about a half an hour, so it's close to room temperature, but just another thing, I didn't want to sear the brisket right away. So the first 3 hours of a brisket cook are typically about getting delicious smoke flavor. You're cooking at lower temperatures. In this case, we're not. We're just gonna be cooking between 300 and 350 the entire time. So what I'm gonna do here is burn a little bit of a dirtier fire if I can. Now the problem with higher temperatures is it's actually harder to burn a dirtier fire. The lower the temps, very easy. Higher you go, But I'm going to try my best to get as much smoke flavor on this guy as possible. And that's the first thing I'm gonna be looking at when we try it later. How is the smoke flavor compared to a low and slow brisket? Now, obviously I don't have a low and slow brisket for comparison because I don't want that much meat in my fridge and I don't want to deal with that and I don't have time, right? We're saving time today. But I've cooked and eaten enough low and slow briskets that I know what I'm looking for and I can give you guys an honest opinion. So we're gonna let this go between 350 and 300 and I'm gonna check back with you guys in an hour, which is different than 3 hours typically because I wanna check this thing frequently to see if there's any spots that are cooking faster than others or there's burning or if I have to spritz or if I have to rotate or flip the thing. I don't know what's gonna happen because I don't do this usually. So this is gonna be a learning process for all of us so you can see how I sort of talk myself through a brisket cook that I'm changing something that's pretty major, such as the temperatures. So that being said, let's get our temps to where we need them to be, and we'll see you in an hour. So we're an hour in here. Looking at this, we see we're getting a nice mahogany color on here. We got a little bit of fat render right here that's starting. Pretty dark all around, but back here is a little area of concern for me. So I might start spraying that maybe in a little bit, I'm not really sure. Let's just tip this up and take a look at the underside. It's feeling pretty soft already. And that's what we got on the fat layer on top, if you will. That's looking really good and protecting us where we need the protection, so we're just gonna leave that as such. And we're feeling pretty loose already, so that's sort of cool. So I'm gonna keep this as is, go for about another hour, and we'll come back and see if I need to spray it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're 2 hours in now. Before we look at the brisket, I just wanna bring a few points to your attention. So if we think about a typical brisket cook, at this point in time, we would be still trying to build smoke flavor, right? But if we cut down the time total that we need, right now we're going into the next phase where we're gonna bump up our temperatures a little bit and we're gonna be looking at forming a beautiful bark. I haven't done anything to this yet as far as spraying or really screwing with it at all. So let's look at what we have and we'll see if we need to spray yet. The brisket itself has shrunk up quite a bit, as you can see where our probes are. It's probably shrunk up about 2 to 3 inches so far. This is pretty crisp, but it's not looking terrible. Up here, I'm a little bit concerned, so I might spritz that. Notice because the fat cap is down, we don't have any juices pooling up top. So let's lift this guy up and check out what we got. That's looking pretty good, and it really sucks in this case that I can't use that as the presentation side, but it ain't looking too bad. If I press the fat here, it's starting to render a little bit. Not too much, but that's fine. So just for even cooking, I'm gonna keep this thing fat side down. I'm gonna take it like this and just turn it this way. Then I'm just gonna spritz a little bit up top, trying to avoid the fat, go along the edges a little bit. Maybe I'll do a little on top here because we're not looking at fat, and that should be good to go. And let's let this bad boy keep going. So my temps this whole time haven't climbed too high. They've been more around the 325 area. But right now we're really looking at building that bark. We're not gonna bump up our temps or anything like that. We're just gonna keep doing what we're doing. And I'm gonna spritz this or check on it every hour or so. My feeling is because we're gonna have a crispier bark, we're gonna have to wrap this. Now I say have to because I think we might risk burning a little bit of the edges or something. So if we get to the point in maybe I would say 4 hours, because that'd be equivalent with a normal brisket cook, about hour 9, 10, you're looking at wrapping. If we get to 4 hours and I feel like this needs to be wrapped, we're gonna do it. And one thing I forgot to do before we leave, I just wanna get an internal temperature real quick. I'm not gonna move the camera back here, but just trust me on this. Yeah, we're feeling pretty good. I mean, this is great for, this would take normally 6 hours to get to this point. We're at 146 in the flat and about 130, oh no, actually 140 in the point. So we're coming along, chugging along pretty good. Right here is some fat that feels really, really nice. So I like where we're at right now. So the bark is going to be the next thing I'm really looking at as well when we go for the taste test in the end, because I want to see how crispy the bark is compared to a normal brisket cook. Does it look the same? Does the color look the same? Did the fat render the same? So far we're looking at smoke flavor during the taste test and the bark. We'll get to the last thing we're going to be looking at when we come back. I'll bring you back in about 2 hours. We'll see if we have to wrap, which I'm assuming we will. Until then, stay hungry, I guess. I don't know. Okay, so we're at the 5-hour check-in. Let's take a closer look at this guy. It shrunk up very much so. Got a nice bark on the outside. A little crispy, just how I like it. But it's a little too crispy, especially down here in the flat area. If I flip this guy over, we got some nice bark here. Not as good as it usually would be because it's been fat side down. If we take a look at our internal temperatures, we're at 162 in the flat. The point's gonna be a little higher, 170-ish. Down here, 180, 182, and then all the way in the back, 182 as well. So at this point in the cook, I am going to wrap. I want to soften up this bark a little bit just because it's very, very crunchy. We've been cooking at high temperatures. That's what's going to happen. I know I said I'd check in after 2 hours and ended up being 3. The reason for that is we hit the stall and I didn't really see a reason to bring you guys back to look at anything. One thing you will notice is I did rotate the brisket. I think it was 180 degrees. So I put the flat toward the fire. It's helped in sort of trying to get through that stall and preventing this side of the point all the way in the back from burning that was facing the fire before. I've also been spritzing anything I felt like was dark, but we are ready to wrap. Let's get it over to the table. Let's get some of this tallow down here where we're gonna put the bottom of our brisket. And I'm gonna use a good amount of this. Look at that, nice and hot. Now we'll take her, put her on just like so. This is meat side down. Bring this up. Bring in our sides a little bit, just like this. That's 1, that's 2, just like that. And now our meat side is back down. We'll take this guy, throw him right in like this, press her down. And here we go. And we'll stick this guy on just like, sort of like it was. And we'll shut her down. Now, another thing I'm changing here that I never, ever do with briskets is wrapping in foil. The reason we're cooking hot and fast, I want to get this brisket done. So we're taking all of the sort of cheats that we can to get this brisket done. The reason I'm wrapping in foil also is I just want to soften those edges a lot because they are a little crispy, almost to the point of being burnt. So I want to keep as many juices in this guy as possible to make sure it's a moist product in the end. One other thing I want to comment on again is the stall. The stall, I would think, with cooking a brisket this way wouldn't take nearly as long as it would if you cooked it traditionally, but this stall took just as long as if I were cooking it at lower temperatures. I don't understand why. I really think it's because of Costco's choice briskets. When I cook a prime, I'm completely fine. There's a black cat over there. Hi, kitty. That freaked me out for a second. When I cook a prime brisket, it never lasts that long. Choice, for whatever reason, every time it's 2 hours, no matter what I'm doing, no matter what cheats I use, it's 2 hours long. So just a fun fact. I don't know what that's about. If you have the same issue, let me know in the comments. So right now we're really trying to render the intermuscular fat. When I probe this thing, it's still not giving like butter. So we just got through the stall. The bark was fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't the best I've ever done, but it was fine. So I wanted to wrap in foil to really not steam it out, but try to get those pieces of fat inside the brisket, just render down and buttery as possible. Obviously with a longer cook, you're gonna have an easier time doing that. But in this case, we're heating up the outside of the brisket way quicker than the inside. And I think foil is gonna help that a little bit. And that's the last thing we're really gonna be paying attention to when we try this brisket. We're gonna be looking, is the fat rendered on the inside of the brisket? Does it give just like a normal brisket that was cooked low and slow? All these things we'll look at. And I'm not really sure at this point. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping this only takes about another hour and a half, which will put us just over the 6 hour mark by half an hour. My feeling is it'll go a little longer, but we'll come back when we're ready to take it off. Okay, here is our brisket. It's been approximately 7.5 hours. So not 6 like I originally thought, but pretty damn close. We're gonna open this guy up and take a look at what we're working with. But before we do that, I just wanted to touch on what I was looking at when I took this off. Now, it's a little bit more difficult to do this based off feel. If you're using butcher paper or if it's not wrapped like I normally do, feel is a pretty good indication. But because we have that extra layer of foil here, I really just had to go based off temperature, but also based off of how well the probe goes in. So I poked quite a few holes in here. You're not gonna see it right now, but I'll sort of give you some temperatures. So the point definitely feels like butter. That temperature is 206. If I go down to the middle was the one that's still, it's a little firm right where the point meets the flat. Not too bad though. Down at the flat, it's a little less pliable, if you will. A little less buttery feel. And then if I go all the way down here, a thing to note, you know, this is 210, it's hotter, but for whatever reason, it might be the foil, and this is why I hate using foil, another reason other than steaming out the brisket. It adds a little bit of resistance when you put your probe in, so you can't really, the brisket itself feels good, but it might just be the foil that's just sort of restricting me. Like right there is a weird spot, I'm not really sure, but a little longer than expected. Let's unwrap this guy, and we'll take a look at what we have. Should probably throw some gloves on, that'd be a smart idea. And we got juices all over the place. But there is our brisket, full of juice. Got a softer bark, but that side part that I was concerned about really softened up a lot. What we're gonna do here is now we're gonna let it rest for only 2 hours or until it becomes about 145 internal. I might throw the foil back over and just let it breathe a little bit because we don't want it to rest too quickly or get down to temp too quickly. Some of you have commented on my videos and said, you know, I'll rest my brisket and all of a sudden it's really hard when I cut into it. It's because you're allowing that moisture to escape too fast. So you want to give it a longer rest. But because we're doing a hot and fast brisket, we want to serve this tonight, we're gonna let it rest 2 hours. Normally I do 14 hours, 12 to 14 hours, pretty much even with my cooking time. But a few things I wanted to say before we go and let this rest. I wanted to give you my initial pros and cons with this method of cooking your brisket. The first pro is it is a time saver. It took us 7.5 hours, way less time than a 12, 16-hour cook. The next pro of this, and the last pro I should say, that I can see so far before tasting it, is if you don't like a lot of surface fat and you really want it to render down, this is a great method. Most of the reason for that was because it was fat side down, so a lot of that dripped off. There's cons to that as well, which I'll talk about in a second, but if you don't like that fat, put your brisket fat side down, it's probably gonna work itself out. I have a few cons, quite a few cons actually. The first thing is I figured this method being hotter would help get through the stall. This wasn't an exception, which makes no logical sense to me because I was cooking it way hotter than I normally do, which is around 275, 280, even 290 to get through the stall. The next con is there is some uneven cooking here. At the end of the day, everything was the same temp, so we're in good shape there. But as far as the bark and how all that goes, some parts were way darker than others. That could be because of my smoker. It probably is because of my smoker. If you're doing this on a kettle or if you're doing it on a drum smoker, you're gonna have less of an issue with that. In this case, there were certain spots that were darkening up before others. I didn't really like that, and there was not much I could really do about that other than spritz it. Also, I should say, because I didn't mention it before, I was using apple cider vinegar and water in my spritz. The next con was constant observation of the brisket. Now, if I use this smoker or any smoker for that matter, for a brisket, the first 3 hours I don't look at it. I usually don't look at it much other than every 2 hours or so following that. But this one I constantly had to look at every 45 to an hour. I didn't like constantly opening the smoker up and doing that. So constant observation, you're on your toes because you're cooking hot and fast. You don't want to burn anything. A little bit of a pain. The next con, as I mentioned before, was the fat side down. I don't like cooking fat side down. I probably could have cooked it fat side up. I didn't want to take that chance because I've burned briskets before on the bottom cooking fat side up at higher temperatures. If you're on a kettle or a drum, you absolutely want to do it fat side down. I wouldn't take that chance because your heat's coming right up from the bottom. Even pellet smokers, heat's coming right up from the bottom. You're gonna burn the underside of that brisket. On an offset, if I had a bigger one, if I was using the Freedom 94, probably could have cooked it fat side up. With this Brazos, I'm a little weary about that. Next con, not really that big of a con. More wood. I used probably the same amount of wood I did on the Patriot Pits in the equal amount of time, so the 7.5 hours, that I did on the Brazos today. I'm trying to get rid of my wood. No girl will take it though, you know what I'm saying? But I'm trying to go through my wood because I've had it for some time. Not really that huge of a con, but if you're trying to save energy, you're trying to save wood, you're gonna find that this is gonna go through it a lot quicker. And then the last con I had was I took this off more based off temp than feel, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago. We're gonna see what kind of product we have. I'm not sure what's gonna happen. And when we review it in about 2 hours, we're going to dive into the 3 things I mentioned before. We're looking for that smoke flavor, we're looking for that bark formation, and we are looking for the intramuscular fat render. So I will see you in about 2 hours. We'll take a look at this and see what we got. Okay, so I don't know if you saw me cutting through this guy. The flat is very dried out. One thing I noticed with cutting through this is that even though I had this fat side down, the bottom, like the meat side, it's pretty crusty still. Like I've put on this, like there's literally, like it's dry as hell. And I think that's because there was literally no fat in this. If we do the pull test, like it's very tough. But that's what I deal with Costco. Like, look at that, you saw that. That's what I deal with Costco briskets. Like their choice briskets are not that great. The taste is there. Still got all those seasonings and everything, but we got a smoke ring on there. I think the smoke ring would have been better if we did it fat side up, but I didn't want to do that. And I'm not regretting not doing that because like, yeah, there's no, like, that's very, look at this. See when I pull that? I know some of you are going to comment like, oh, you suck at cooking hot and fast, whatever. So now let's try the point. So this point, this flat right here on the point, it's preventing this from bending. I think the point has a lot of good fat in there. If you look at this thing where the fat band is, the decal, if you will, it's rendered, but it sort of reminds me of the first brisket I ever cooked where it was just like a little gross. It looks pretty good. In this case, it's not as bad as that brisket, but let's try this out. So I want to just get part of the point here. That's a little bit better just because of the intermuscular fat. Feeling back here on this guy, this is a little crispy. We can make some good burnt ends out of this, but I already cut off some burnt ends. I have a feeling these are going to be delicious, actually. That's interesting because not as melt in your mouth as you would think, but the outside of it is really, really crispy. But like, it's got a different texture than briskets I've cooked where I'm doing it low and slow. It's like sticky. It's good. Looking back at the 3 variables we want to test. First of all, the smoke flavor. It's there. I don't think it's as prevalent as if you smoke it low and slow, because if you're exposing a brisket to smoke for, let's say, 10 hours before you wrap it, if you don't wrap it, now we're going at about 14 to 15 hours typically, you're going to have better smoke flavor. You can taste it. It's not like I'm tasting this and saying like, wow, was this cooked in an oven? It's there. The bark is also fine. It's a little crispier in spots. I don't think I would ever do this again with the fat cap down on my smoker particularly. I also am a little concerned about the fact that the meat side was up and still was a little chewy. Also, the fat render. So the fat rendered fine. If I let it rest for a little bit longer, it probably would have been better, but we're going hot and fast. That's what this experiment was all about. So I'm still gonna eat this obviously, but it's just not there. Like you can see right here. I can pull that off pretty much almost no problem, but down here where the smoke ring is, it's really tough to pull apart. I personally like low and slow cooking. That's what I've always done. This is my concern with this one. Like I said, not terrible. I'm still gonna eat it. I'm still gonna serve it to my friends that don't have a clue. So that being said, if you have been debating making this brisket this way, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Fatty's Feast. Hopefully I can discourage you. And some of you are going to say, like I said, you just suck at cooking brisket, whatever. I literally don't care. Give me your worst. But if you like this episode of Fatty's Feast, please like and comment things you want to see on the next episode. I'll do anything. I'll do smoker stuff. I'll do grill stuff. Whatever you want, you tell me. Over here, I'm gonna put a video specifically designed for you. You're gonna love it. And then over here, a video of my smoker beef brisket. I don't remember what I call it. I can never remember this playlist name, but it's there. Check it out. Hours of entertainment just for you, smack dab in the middle. Bald, diabetic, average, bearded face so much. You can subscribe if you want to see more from me. And then stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay hungry. Cheers.